The stars in the void margins did not shine like other stars. They were old and tired, dying slowly in the darkness between galaxies. No trading ships came here. No explorers mapped these dead zones. The gravitational currents were too dangerous, the distances too vast, and the rewards too small. This was a place where things came to be forgotten. Captain Thyrus Velnoth stood at the observation window of the Seeker of Truths and watched the twin dying stars spin around each other in their final dance. Red and orange light painted her blue-scaled face as she studied the readings on her datapad. 40 years she had spent searching for lost civilizations, dead worlds, and forgotten histories. The Galactic Concord paid her well to find things that others had missed. But in all her decades of work, she had never seen readings like these. Captain called her navigator, a thin creature named Yeth whose 4 eyes blinked in sequence when he was nervous. The anomaly is 300 kilometers ahead. It appears to be artificial. Artificial? Thyrus walked to the main display screen. Out here? That is not possible. Nothing lives in the void margins. The sensors do not lie, Captain. It is a vessel. A large one. The bridge crew gathered around the screen. There were 12 of them representing 4 different species of the Galactic Concord. They had worked together for 6 years, mapping dead civilizations and recovering lost technology. They were scientists first, explorers second. None of them were soldiers. The image on the screen made Thyrus feel cold in a way she could not explain. The ship was massive. It stretched 3 kilometers from front to back, a dark shape against the darker void. Its hull was black, so black that it seemed to eat the light from the dying stars. Weapon arrays covered its surface in patterns that made no sense to Thyrus. Gun turrets pointed in every direction. Missile tubes lined its sides like the spines of some deep-sea creature. The entire design spoke of only one purpose: destruction. "What species built this?" asked Drax, the security officer. He was a Corvani, tall and muscular with gray skin and 4 arms. His people had once been warriors, though now they served as peacekeepers throughout the Concord. "The design matches nothing in our databases. Run a full scan," Thyrus ordered. "I want to know everything. Power signatures, life signs, age of materials, point of origin." The science team worked in silence. Minutes passed. The ship drifted closer, and with each passing moment, Thyrus felt her unease grow. There was something wrong about this vessel, something that went beyond its obvious purpose as a weapon of war. It felt like looking at a sleeping predator, one that might wake at any moment. "Captain," said Keth, the junior researcher. His voice was barely a whisper. "I found markings on the hull. Letters. A name. Can you translate?" "The computer is trying. The language is in our databases, but it carries the highest restriction level I have ever seen. Maximum security clearance required." Thyrus frowned. "Override it. Use my authorization code." Keth entered the codes. The screen flickered. Then a single word appeared, translated into Concord Common Tongue. Just a name. But when Thyrus read it, her blood turned to ice. "Human. That is not possible," whispered Yeth. "Humans are a myth, a story to frighten children." "They were real," Drax said. His voice was hard, serious. "My grandfather's grandfather fought in the cleanup operations after their war. He never spoke of what he saw, but he had nightmares until the day he died." Thyrus knew the stories. Everyone in the Concord knew them, though few believed they were true. 800 years ago, a species called humanity had risen from a small planet in a distant arm of the galaxy. They were young, ambitious, and terrifyingly adaptable. In less than 3 centuries, they had spread across hundreds of star systems. Then they had encountered the Sketh Dominion. The war that followed was the stuff of nightmares. The Sketh were a hive-mind species that consumed everything in their path. They saw other intelligent beings as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Humanity had stood against them, alone, while the rest of the galaxy watched from a safe distance. For 200 years, the war raged. Both sides developed weapons of unimaginable power. Both sides committed acts that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. And then, one day, it all stopped. A flash of light brighter than a billion suns. A chain reaction that consumed entire star systems. When the light faded, both species were gone. The Sketh homeworlds were ash. Every human colony was a radioactive ruin. The Galactic Concord formed in the aftermath, united by a single goal: Never again. Never again would the galaxy allow such a war to happen. Never again would species be left to fight alone. The humans had become a legend, a warning, a ghost story told to remind people of the cost of total war. And now, Thyrus was looking at one of their warships. There are no power signatures, Keth reported. No life signs. The ship appears to be completely dead. Based on hull decay analysis, it has been drifting here for approximately 800 years. Since the end of the war? Thyrus said. Yes, Captain. Drax stepped forward. We should leave. Report this to Concord Command and let the military handle it. This is not something for scientists to touch. The military would destroy it, Thyrus replied, or lock it away where no one could study it. Do you not understand what this represents? 800 years of history, lost. The humans left nothing behind except ruins and radiation. This ship could tell us who they really were. Not the monsters from the stories, but the people, their culture, their technology, their dreams, their weapons. Drax said grimly. Those too. And is it not better that we understand those weapons? That we learn from them? The Concord has maintained peace for 8 centuries by remembering the past. This ship is part of that past. The bridge was silent. The crew looked at each other, uncertain. Finally, Yeth spoke. The captain is right. We are scientists. We came here to find lost history. We found it. One by one, the others nodded. Even Drax, though his face showed his unhappiness. Prepare a boarding party, Thyrus ordered. Full environmental suits, minimal equipment. We observe and document only. We do not touch anything unless absolutely necessary. The Seeker of Truths moved closer to the dead warship. As they approached, more details became visible. Thyrus could see the battle scars now, massive gouges in the hull where enemy weapons had struck. Entire sections were missing, torn away by explosions. The ship had fought hard before it died. Near what appeared to be the main airlock, letters were etched into the metal. Thyrus read them slowly, sounding out the unfamiliar human sounds. Wa. N.S. Prometheus. Prometheus, Keth repeated. My translator says it was a figure from human mythology, a being who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. He was punished for this crime, but humans remembered him as a hero. Fitting name for a warship, Drax muttered. The boarding party assembled in the shuttle bay. 6 members of the crew, including Thyrus, Drax, and Keth. They wore full environmental suits with built-in scanners and recording devices. Each of them carried a small toolkit, but no weapons. Weapons had no place on a scientific expedition. Drax had argued about this for 10 minutes before finally giving up. The shuttle detached from the Seeker of Truths and drifted toward the Prometheus. Up close, the human ship was even more impressive. The hull was made of an alloy that Thyrus did not recognize, something that had resisted 8 centuries of cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. The weapon arrays were enormous, each one large enough to destroy a small moon. The airlock is responding to our approach, Keth said suddenly. It is. Opening. Thyrus felt her heart beat faster. The ship has no power. How can the airlock be opening? I do not know. Perhaps backup systems. Emergency power. The mechanism appears to be mechanical, not electronic. The airlock yawned wide, a dark mouth waiting to swallow them. Thyrus knew she should turn back. Every instinct told her that something was wrong, but she was a scientist, and scientists did not run from mysteries. Take us in, she ordered. The shuttle entered the airlock. Behind them, the outer door closed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss that they could hear even through their suits, the inner door began to open. Air rushed past them, stale and cold but breathable. The ship had somehow maintained its atmosphere for 800 years. Impossible, Keth whispered. They stepped out of the shuttle and into the darkness of the Prometheus. The corridors were narrow and utilitarian. There were no decorations, no artwork, no attempt to make the space comfortable. Every surface was metal. Every corner was sharp. The walls were lined with pipes and cables and hatches that led to unknown systems. Emergency lights glowed dimly at floor level, casting red shadows that made the darkness seem alive. This way, Thyrus said, following a map that Keth was building from sensor data. The bridge should be at the center of the ship. They walked for what felt like hours. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them through sections that had clearly seen heavy use. Thyris noticed scratches on the walls, dents in the floor, places where the metal had been worn smooth by countless footsteps. People had lived here, worked here, perhaps died here. They found the crew quarters near the ship's center. Row after row of small rooms, each one containing a single bed, a small desk, and a personal storage locker. Thyris entered one of the rooms and stopped, her breath catching in her throat. There were photographs on the walls. Human faces looked back at her. A male and female, standing together in what appeared to be a garden. Children playing in water, their mouths open in silent laughter. An older female with white hair, smiling at the camera. These were not soldiers. They were people, families, loved ones left behind. They carried their memories with them, Keth said softly. Into battle, Thyris looked at the photographs for a long moment. She tried to imagine leaving her homeworld, knowing she might never return, knowing she might die in the cold darkness of space. She tried to imagine carrying images of her family into that darkness, looking at them each night before she slept. She could not imagine it. And yet the humans had done exactly that. "Keep moving," she said, her voice thick with emotions she did not want to show. The medical bay was larger than Thyris expected. Rows of empty beds lined the walls, and cabinets filled with strange equipment stood in orderly lines. But it was the far end of the room that drew their attention. Stasis pods, dozens of them, arranged in a grid pattern, each one connected to a central power supply. Most of them were damaged, their glass covers cracked, their occupants long since decayed into dust and bone. But as Thyris walked among them, counting the dead, she saw something that made her stop. One pod was intact. The glass was frosted with ice, but through it, Thyris could see a face. Human, female, middle-aged by the standards of her species, with short dark hair streaked with gray. She wore a uniform covered in symbols and markings that Thyris recognized as indicators of rank. This was an officer, a leader. "She is alive," Keth said, his voice filled with wonder and fear. The readings show a heartbeat, 1 pulse per minute, brain activity consistent with deep stasis dreaming. She has been asleep for 800 years. Drax stepped back, his hands reaching for a weapon he did not carry. "We need to leave. Now. Before she wakes." "She will not wake," Thyris said. "The stasis system is failing. Look at the power levels. She has perhaps a few hours left. Maybe less. Then let her die in peace. She is the last of her kind. Let her pass without knowing what happened to her people." Thyris looked at the sleeping human. 800 years, alone in the darkness, dreaming of a home that no longer existed. It seemed cruel beyond measure, but Thyris was a scientist, and scientists asked questions. "Document everything," she ordered. "I want full scans of the stasis system, the medical bay, the entire ship if possible." A noise interrupted her. A click, followed by a hum. Across the room, a console that had been dark suddenly lit up with symbols Thyris could not read. Drax moved toward it, reaching out his scanner. His hand touched the console. The ship shuddered. Emergency lighting flickered, then blazed to full brightness. Red light flooded every corridor, every room, every space. A sound filled the air, a voice speaking in a language Thyris did not understand. It was harsh and commanding, each word bitten off like a piece of metal. Then the voice changed. It cycled through different languages, hundreds of them, thousands, moving faster and faster until finally it found one that Thyris recognized. Foreign biological signatures detected. Threat assessment initiated. Command authority required. Initiating emergency revival protocol for ranking officer. "What did you do?" Thyris shouted at Drax. "I touched nothing. I only scanned it." The stasis pod began to hiss. The ice on the glass melted, running down the sides in streams of water. The lid cracked open, just a centimeter, and warm air poured out. "We need to go," Drax said. "Right now." They ran for the door, but the door did not open. Drax pressed the controls, hit the panel with his fist, tried to force it with his strength. Nothing worked. "The ship has locked us in," Keth said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were wild with fear. "It is not letting us leave." They turned back to the stasis pod. The lid was opening fully now, rising on silent hinges. The human inside moved, her chest rising as she took a deep breath. Her eyes opened. Thyris had seen predators before. She had studied species whose entire existence was built around hunting and killing. She recognized the look in those eyes. This was not confusion. This was not the slow awakening of someone emerging from sleep. This was immediate, sharp, dangerous awareness. The human was scanning the room, assessing threats, calculating responses. It took her less than 2 seconds to sit up. She looked at Thyris, then at the others. Her gaze moved across their faces, their equipment, their positions in the room. She was reading them like data on a screen, gathering information, making decisions. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse from centuries of disuse, but it was clear and steady, and it carried the weight of absolute authority. Report, crew status. Thyris opened her mouth to respond, but she found that she had no words. 800 years of history stood before her, wrapped in the body of a single human female, the last survivor of a dead species, the commander of a ghost warship, and she was awake. The human climbed out of the stasis pod with movements that seemed too smooth, too controlled for someone who had been asleep for 8 centuries. Her legs did not shake. Her hands did not tremble. She stood on the cold metal floor and looked around the medical bay with eyes that missed nothing. Captain Thyris Velnoth forced herself to remain calm. She was a scientist. She had studied dead civilizations her entire life. Now she was face to face with a living piece of history, and she needed to treat this situation with the same careful approach she would use for any first contact scenario. "My name is Captain Thyris Velnoth," she said slowly, making sure her translator was working properly. "I represent the Galactic Concord, an alliance of species dedicated to peace and cooperation. We found your ship drifting in the void margins. We meant no harm." The human studied her for a long moment. Then she walked past Thyris without a word, moving to a wall panel that looked like all the other wall panels. She pressed her palm against it, and a hidden drawer slid open. Inside was a uniform, folded neatly, and a small device that the human attached to her ear. "Your translator is inefficient," the human said, her voice now clear and strong. "This will work better." She dressed quickly, pulling on the uniform with practiced efficiency. Thyris noticed the symbols on her shoulders, the same markings that had been on the uniform she wore in stasis. This was definitely a high-ranking officer. "I am Admiral Lyra Chen," the human said, "commander of the United Nations ship Prometheus. You said crew status. You are not my crew." "No," Thyris admitted. "We are explorers, scientists. We came to study your ship." Admiral Chen moved to a console and began typing commands. The screen came alive with data streams that Thyris could not read. The human's fingers moved across the interface with the speed of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. 817 years, Chen said. Her voice did not change, but something in her posture shifted, a tension that had not been there before. "I have been asleep for 817 years. The war," Thyris began. "I know about the war. I was fighting it when I entered stasis." Chen turned to face them. "What happened? How did it end? Where is the rest of the fleet?" Thyris exchanged glances with her crew. Drax shook his head slightly, warning her to be careful. But what could she do? The human deserved to know the truth. "There is no fleet," Thyris said gently. "There is no humanity. Your species destroyed itself in the final battle against the Sketh. A chain reaction of some kind. It consumed your worlds and theirs. Everything was destroyed." Admiral Chen stared at her. For the first time, something cracked in that controlled expression. Pain flickered across her face, there and gone in an instant, pushed down beneath the surface. "Operation Sunfire," she whispered. "They actually did it. You know what happened? I know what was planned. I did not think they would go through with it." Chen turned back to the console, her fingers flying across the controls. "The Prometheus was on the edge of Sketh territory when the order came. We were supposed to retreat to safe distance before the detonation. We did not make it. The gravitational wave caught us, threw us into uncharted space. The crew..." She stopped. Thyris saw her eyes move to the rows of damaged stasis pods, the dust and bones that were all that remained of her people. "The crew did not survive," Chen finished. "But I did." She was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and turned back to her console. "The ship's primary systems are offline. Emergency power only. ARS." Respond. A voice filled the air. The same voice that had spoken when the ship first awakened. But now it was calmer, more controlled. Airs online, Admiral. Primary systems at 12%. Secondary systems at 43%. Weapons systems offline. Propulsion offline. Life support at minimum function. Shall I begin full restoration protocol? Yes. Priority to sensors and communications. I need to know what is happening in the galaxy. Understood. Beginning restoration. Estimated time to partial function. 4 hours. Thyras stepped forward. Admiral Chen, please. We need to talk. The galaxy has changed. The war ended 800 years ago. The Galactic Concord has maintained peace since then. Whatever you are planning, I am not planning anything. Chen interrupted. I am gathering information. That is what a commander does when she wakes up in an unknown situation. She learns before she acts. Then let us help you learn. We have records, histories, data about everything that has happened since your time. We can share all of it with you. Chen looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Walk with me. Show me what has become of your galaxy. Ares, continue restoration but do not activate weapons systems until I give the order. Understood, Admiral. The doors to the medical bay opened. Thyras realized that the ship had unlocked them, responding to Chen's silent authority. She wondered what other systems were waiting for the Admiral's command. They walked through the corridors of the Prometheus, and as they walked, Thyras explained. She told Chen about the formation of the Galactic Concord, the bringing together of species that had once been rivals or enemies. She told her about the treaties that prevented wars, the councils that resolved disputes, the shared technology that lifted all species together. Chen listened without expression. Her eyes moved constantly, checking corners, scanning doorways, never fully relaxing. This was a woman who had spent her life at war. Thyras realized. Peace was a foreign concept to her. And the Sketh? Chen asked finally. You said they were destroyed, but your records mention a species called the Sethrani. The description matches. Thyras hesitated. This was the dangerous part. The Sketh were not completely destroyed, she admitted. Survivors from distant colonies escaped the chain reaction. Over the centuries, they changed. The hive mind fractured. Individual consciousness emerged. They evolved away from their aggressive nature. Today, the Sethrani are members of the Galactic Concord. They are peaceful traders and scholars. Chen stopped walking. Her face had gone hard, her eyes cold. Peaceful, she repeated. The Sketh are peaceful. They are not the same species anymore. They have changed. Species do not change. They adapt. They hide. They wait for an opportunity. Chen started walking again, faster now. You do not know them like I do. You did not see what they did to our colonies. What they did to prisoners. What they did to children. Admiral, please. I saw them eat people alive. I watched them convert entire populations into food sources. I held the hand of a 12-year-old girl while she died from wounds I cannot even describe to you. Chen's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with an anger that had been building for 8 centuries. Do not tell me they have changed. They reached the bridge. The door opened at Chen's approach, revealing a command center that took Thyras's breath away. It was smaller than she expected, but every surface was covered with screens and controls. The captain's chair sat at the center, raised above the other stations, giving its occupant a view of everything. Chen sat in the chair. The screens around her came alive, filling with data. Errors. Show me current Sethrani population centers. Admiral. Long-range sensors are still calibrating. However, I have accessed the alien vessels database. The Sethrani maintain colonies in 37 star systems. Primary population center is a planet they call Sethrani Prime, located in Sector 17. A star map appeared, showing the galaxy as it existed today. Red dots marked Sethrani worlds. Thyras felt a chill run down her spine as she watched Chen study the map. Their total population? Approximately 4 billion individuals. Admiral. Military capabilities? Unknown. However, based on available data, the Sethrani are classified as a low-threat species within the Galactic Concord. They maintain minimal defensive forces. Chen leaned back in her chair. Her expression was unreadable. Show me human space. The map shifted. A large section near the galaxy's edge was highlighted in gray. Designated Exclusion Zone 7. Errors reported. Entry prohibited by Galactic Concord Law. Residual radiation levels remain dangerous. No life signs detected. Human species status. Extinct. Thyrus watched Chen's face as she stared at the gray zone. Everything her people had built. Everything they had dreamed of. Reduced to a patch of forbidden space on a map. 800 years of silence. 800 years of nothing but radiation and debris. Admiral, Thyrus said softly, I am truly sorry. Chen did not respond. She continued to stare at the map, at the empty space where her civilization had once existed. Minutes passed. The bridge was silent except for the hum of awakening systems. Finally, Chen spoke. Errors. What is the status of the ship's weapon systems? Weapon systems are offline but intact. Molecular forges are at minimum function. Drone production facilities are undamaged. With sufficient resources, full offensive capability could be restored within 72 hours. Thyrus felt fear grip her heart. Admiral, what are you doing? I am asking questions, Captain. Nothing more. Chen turned to look at her. You said your Galactic Concord values peace, that you learn from the past to prevent future wars. Then let us learn together. She gestured, and the star map changed. It showed the Prometheus's journey from Earth to the edge of Sketh space. The battles fought along the way. The colonies lost and defended, the slow, grinding advance of a species that refused to give up. Tell me what your histories say about my people, Chen said. Tell me how we are remembered. Thyrus looked at the map, at the lines of battle that crossed the galaxy like scars. She thought about the stories she had heard as a child, the warnings and the fear. You are remembered as warriors, she said carefully. The species that stood against the Sketh when no one else would. But also, as a warning, the species that built weapons so terrible that you had to destroy yourselves to stop them. The reason the Galactic Concord was formed was to prevent any species from ever becoming what humanity became. Chen nodded slowly. Fair. We did become something terrible in the end. We had no choice. The Sketh were an existential threat. They could not be negotiated with, could not be reasoned with. They were a predator species, and we were prey. So we evolved. We became predators too. And now? Now I am the last human, the last predator. Chen looked at the Sethrani colonies on the map, and the last of our enemies still exists. Drax stepped forward, his forearms crossed in a defensive posture. You cannot be thinking of attacking them. One ship against an entire civilization? It is suicide. The Prometheus is not just a ship, Corvani. It is a factory, a fleet, and a weapon, all in one. ARS. If I authorized full autonomous operations, what would our chances be? Against the Sethrani civilization? Uncertain, Admiral. However, the Prometheus was designed for exactly this scenario, extended independent operations against a superior enemy force. Given sufficient resources and time, probability of significant damage to target civilization is high. Define significant damage. Extinction level impact. Probability 73% within 20 years of continuous operations. The bridge fell silent. Thyrus stared at Chen, at this woman who spoke of genocide with the calm of someone discussing weather. You cannot, Thyrus whispered. The Sethrani have changed. They are innocent. Innocent? Chen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Did you know that the Sketh had a word for other species? They called us Kethnar. It means meat that thinks. That was all we were to them. Thinking meat. Resources to be consumed. She stood up from the chair and walked to the main screen. How do you change a species like that? How do you teach meat-eaters to become vegetarians? Time, Thyrus said. 800 years of time. They evolved, Admiral. They became something new. Perhaps. Chen touched the screen, tracing the outline of Sethrani Prime. Or perhaps they are simply waiting, growing stronger, preparing for the day when they can finish what they started. And if they are not, if they truly have changed, Chen turned to face her. For a moment, just a moment, Thyrus saw something beneath the warrior's mask. Exhaustion, grief, a loneliness so vast it could swallow stars. Then I have nothing, Chen said quietly. If the enemy is gone, truly gone, then there is no purpose. No mission. Just an old soldier in a dead ship, floating through a galaxy that has forgotten her. She paused. Is that what you want me to believe, Captain? That everything I fought for, everything my people died for, has become nothing? Not nothing, Thyras replied. A foundation. Your sacrifice gave the galaxy a chance to build something better. The Concord exists because of you. Peace exists because of you. Peace exists because we killed enough of them to buy you time. Do not romanticize it. Chen returned to her chair. She sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the map, at the red dots that represented the descendants of her greatest enemy. Eras. Begin full system restoration. All systems except weapons. I want to know everything about this galaxy before I make any decisions. Understood, Admiral. And open the airlocks. Let our guests return to their ship. Thyras felt relief flood through her. Thank you, Admiral. Do not thank me yet, Captain. I am not merciful. I am simply patient. Chen looked at her with those cold, calculating eyes. You will return to your galactic concord and tell them what you found here. Tell them that humanity is not quite extinct. Tell them that the Prometheus is awake. And tell them that I will be watching the Sethrani very closely. And if we refuse to leave, then you will remain here as my guests until I decide otherwise. The choice is yours. Thyras looked at her crew, at their frightened faces. Then she looked at Admiral Lyra Chen, the last human, the commander of a ghost warship that could destroy civilizations. We will deliver your message, she said. Chen nodded. Good. Heirs will transfer all relevant data to your vessel. Historical records, technical specifications, everything except weapon systems. Consider it a gift from one species to another. Why would you give us this? Because you deserve to know who we were. Not the monsters from your stories. Not the weapons we were forced to build. The people, the scientists and artists and dreamers who built a civilization among the stars. Chen's voice softened, just slightly. Let them remember us for more than our war. Can you do that, Captain? Thyras nodded. I will try. That is all anyone can do. The aliens left the bridge, escorted by lights that guided them back to the airlock. But Thyras paused at the door and looked back at Admiral Chen. The last human sat alone in the command chair of her dead ship. She was surrounded by screens showing data about a galaxy she no longer recognized. Her crew was dust. Her people were legend. Everything she had known was gone, but she was still fighting, still watching, still waiting. Thyras wondered if she would ever stop. 3 days passed after the aliens left. 3 days of silence, broken only by the hum of repairing systems and the steady voice of Ares reporting progress. Admiral Lyra Chen spent most of that time in her quarters, reading through 8 centuries of history. The data that the Galactic Concord ship had left was extensive. Political histories, cultural studies, scientific advances, war records, peace treaties, millions of documents covering every major event since the end of the Human-Sketh War. Chen read all of it, searching for truth in a sea of information. She learned that the Galactic Concord had formed within a decade of Operation Sunfire. The shock of witnessing 2 species destroy themselves had united the surviving civilizations in a way nothing else could have. They built institutions, created laws, established peacekeeping forces. For 800 years, there had been no major conflicts. She learned that humanity was remembered as both hero and monster. Some species taught their children about the brave warriors who had stood against the Sketh when no one else would. Others taught them about the dangers of total war, using humanity as an example of what happened when a species lost its soul in the pursuit of victory. She learned that the Sethrani, as they now called themselves, had undergone a transformation that scientists still did not fully understand. The hive mind that had once connected all Sketh had fractured after Operation Sunfire. Individuals emerged, each one developing their own thoughts, their own personalities, their own sense of right and wrong. Within a few generations, they had become a completely different species. Chen did not believe it. She had seen too much, lost too much. The images in her mind were too vivid, too painful. The screams of colonists being dragged from their homes, the sight of Sketh warriors feeding on captured soldiers, the small hand of a child growing cold in her grip. Species did not change. They adapted. They hid. They waited. On the 4th day, Chen returned to the bridge. The Prometheus had restored most of its primary systems. Sensors now reached across dozens of light years. Communications could contact any world in the sector. Propulsion was still offline, but the engines were repairing themselves, molecule by molecule. ERAS. Status report. All primary systems at 72% and rising. Weapon systems remain offline per your orders. The alien vessel, Seeker of Truths, has exited sensor range, heading toward Concord space. No other vessels detected within scanning distance. Show me the ship's historical database. I want to see the final days of the war. A screen activated, displaying a menu of files. Chen began with the battle reports, the cold technical language of military operations. Ships destroyed, colonies lost, casualties counted in millions. But the numbers were not enough. She needed to understand what had happened, how the war had come to its terrible end, why her people had chosen extinction over survival. She found what she was looking for in the personal logs of Admiral Marcus Wong, commander of the United Earth Defense Force. His face appeared on the screen. An old man with tired eyes and gray hair. He spoke directly to the camera, his voice heavy with exhaustion. This is my final log entry. By the time anyone finds this recording, the war will be over. One way or another. Chen watched as Wong explained the situation. After 200 years of fighting, humanity was losing. The Sketh had endless numbers, endless resources, endless patience. For every colony humanity saved, they lost 2 others. For every Sketh hive they destroyed, 3 more took its place. We have tried everything, Wong said. Diplomacy, guerrilla warfare, biological weapons. Nothing works. The Sketh cannot be negotiated with because they do not see us as equals. We are not people to them. We are food. Chen remembered those days. She remembered the desperate battles, the shrinking territories, the growing certainty that humanity would not survive. And so we have developed something new, Wong continued. Something we hoped we would never need. We call it Eris. The screen showed schematics that Chen recognized immediately. The Prometheus, her ship. Eris is not just a warship. It is an autonomous weapon system, designed to continue fighting long after its human crew is dead. It can learn, adapt, build copies of itself, harvest resources from asteroids and moons. Once activated, it will not stop until the enemy is completely destroyed. Wong paused, and Chen saw something in his eyes that she understood perfectly. The weight of command, the burden of impossible choices. We built Heirs because we thought it might save us. But now I realize the truth. Heirs would not save humanity. It would replace us. We would win the war, but we would lose ourselves in the process. We would become the very thing we are fighting. Chen felt cold. She had known some of this, but hearing it from Admiral Wong made it real in a way that data files could not. There is another option, Wong said. A final option. We call it Sunfire. The screen showed a map of human space. Dozens of colonies marked with glowing points. Each point was a fusion core, the massive power generators that kept human civilization running. If we detonate every fusion core simultaneously, the chain reaction will destroy everything. Our worlds, the Sketh homeworlds, every colony, every ship, every living being in the blast radius. Wong's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. It is genocide, for us and for them. But it will end the war. It will ensure that the Sketh can never threaten anyone again. He looked directly at the camera, and Chen felt as though he was speaking to her across the centuries. We have voted. The council was unanimous. Tomorrow, we will contact all ships in the field and give them a chance to evacuate to safe distance. Then, we will execute Sunfire. Humanity will die, but humanity will win. The galaxy will remember us as monsters, but the galaxy will be safe. The recording ended. Chen sat in silence for a long time. She had known about Sunfire, of course. Every commander in the fleet had known, but she had never believed they would actually go through with it. She had thought it was a bluff. A desperate threat to force the Sketh to negotiate. They had not been bluffing. Heirs, did I receive the evacuation order? Negative, Admiral. The Prometheus was operating under communications blackout at the time of Operation Sunfire. The evacuation signal was never received. The ship was caught in the gravitational wave of the detonation and thrown into uncharted space. And the crew? The crew did not survive the gravitational stresses, Admiral. All personnel expired within hours of the event. Only your stasis pod remained functional due to its reinforced shielding. Chen closed her eyes. She imagined the Prometheus tumbling through space, its crew dying around her, the universe tearing itself apart outside the hull. And through it all, she had slept, dreaming of a war that had already ended. Show me what happened to the Sketh survivors. The screen changed, displaying Concord historical records. Chen watched as scattered Sketh colonies struggled to survive in the aftermath of Sunfire. Without their central hive mind, they were lost and confused. Many died in the first years, unable to cope with individual existence, but some adapted. Chen watched footage of early Sethrani communities, groups of former Sketh learning to live as individuals. They developed new languages, new cultures, new ways of thinking. They made contact with other species, slowly building relationships based on trade and mutual benefit rather than predation. This proves nothing, Chen muttered. They could be acting, pretending to be peaceful while they rebuild their strength. Admiral, I have been analyzing Sethrani behavior patterns for 72 hours. Their physiological responses, communication methods, and social structures are consistent with genuine cultural transformation. Deception at this scale would require coordination that their current individual-based society cannot support. You are a weapon, Eras. You were built to find threats. Why are you telling me there is no threat? I was built to assess situations accurately, so that appropriate responses can be selected. My analysis suggests that the Sethrani are not a current threat. However, if you believe otherwise, I will support whatever action you choose. Chen stood up and walked to the main view screen. Stars filled the display, distant points of light in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, 4 billion Sethrani were living their lives, going to work, raising children, building futures, just like humans had done before the war. Heirs, access the Sethrani cultural database. Show me their records of the war. Compiling, documents appeared on the screen. Art and literature and academic studies, all dealing with the human-Sketh conflict. Chen began to read. The Sethrani did not hide their history. They taught it to their children, in all its horror. They showed them what the Sketh had been, what they had done, why they had been hated. They did not make excuses. They did not try to justify the actions of their ancestors, but they also taught something else. Chen found a speech given by a Sethrani leader named Threshvel, recorded 300 years after Operation Sunfire. We carry the guilt of our ancestors, Threshvel said. We cannot undo what they did. We cannot bring back the humans they killed. But we can honor their memory by becoming something better, by proving that the Sketh were not all that we could be. The speech continued, describing a new Sethrani philosophy based on respect for all life, cooperation instead of competition, and remembrance of the past. The humans gave us a gift, Threshvel said. They gave us death, yes, but they also gave us a chance to be reborn. They broke the hive mind that had enslaved us for millennia. They freed us to become individuals. And now we must prove that we are worthy of that freedom. Chen stopped the recording. Her hands were trembling. Eras, show me the Sethrani memorial on their homeworld. An image appeared. A massive structure, carved from black stone, rising above a plain of purple grass. It was shaped like a human figure, arms raised toward the sky, face turned upward as if looking at the stars. The monument to humanity, Eras reported. Constructed 412 years ago. It stands at the center of Sethrani Prime's capital city. Every year, millions of Sethrani visit to pay their respects. Chen stared at the monument. Her eyes traced the human shape, the careful detail of the sculpture. Someone had studied human form, human posture, human expression. Someone had wanted to get it right. They mourn us, she whispered. Affirmative, Admiral. The Sethrani observe an annual day of remembrance for the human species. During this time, all regular activities cease, and the population reflects on the cost of war and the importance of peace. The enemy mourned humanity. The enemy honored their sacrifice. The enemy had built a monument to remember them, not as victims, but as heroes. Chen did not know how to process this information. It contradicted everything she believed, everything she had fought for. The Sketh were monsters. They had to be monsters. Otherwise, what had the war been for? Admiral, Eris said. Incoming communication. The Galactic Concord vessel has returned. accompanied by a fleet of ships. They are hailing us. Chen turned to the communications console. A face appeared on the screen, unfamiliar, with features that combined elements of several species she had seen in the Concord database. "This is Ambassador Yul Karen of the Galactic Concord Council," the figure said. "We have received Captain Velnoth's report. Admiral Chen, the Council requests an immediate meeting to discuss the situation." "The situation," Chen repeated. "You mean me?" "We mean the discovery of a fully functional human warship with extinction-level capabilities. Surely you understand our concern." Chen understood. In their position, she would have responded the same way. A ghost from the past, commanding a weapon that could destroy civilizations. Of course they were afraid. "I will meet with your council," she said, "but I will not disarm my ship. Not until I am satisfied that the Sethrani are truly what they claim to be." Ambassador Karen nodded. "That is acceptable. We will provide escort to Council Station. The Sethrani representative has asked to be present at the meeting. I trust you have no objection?" Chen's jaw tightened. The Sethrani wanted to meet her. The descendants of the Sketh, face to face with the last human warrior. "No objection," she said. "I look forward to it." The communication ended. Chen turned back to the view screen, to the stars and the darkness and the mysteries that waited. 800 years. The galaxy had changed in ways she could not have imagined. The enemy had become something new. The war had ended in a way that no one had expected, but she was still a soldier, and soldiers followed orders, gathered intelligence, and made decisions based on evidence. It was time to see the truth for herself. "Heirs, prepare the ship for escort. We are going to Council Station." "Understood, Admiral. Should I prepare weapon systems for potential engagement?" Chen hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No. Keep weapons offline, but maintain full readiness. If this is a trap, I want to be ready." "Understood." Preparations underway. The Prometheus hummed with renewed energy as its engines finally came online. The ghost warship was moving again, carrying the last human toward a meeting that would determine the fate of millions. Chen wondered what she would find when she got there. Enemies pretending to be friends? Former monsters who had truly become something better? Or something else entirely? Something she could not yet imagine. There was only one way to find out. She sat in her command chair and waited as the stars began to move. Council Station hung in the void between three star systems, a massive structure of metal and glass that served as the headquarters of the Galactic Concord. Ships of every size and design floated around it, from small personal vessels to massive cargo haulers. It was a place of diplomacy and trade, where species that had once been strangers learned to become neighbors. The U.N.S. Prometheus arrived under escort, surrounded by a dozen Concord warships. Admiral Lyra Chen watched them through the view screen, analyzing their weapon systems, calculating their threat level. The Concord ships were impressive, but they were designed for peacekeeping, not war. Against the Prometheus, they would last minutes at best. Ayres confirmed her assessment. "Escort vessels pose minimal threat, Admiral. Shall I prepare defensive countermeasures?" "Negative. We are here as guests, not invaders." "Understood." The Prometheus docked at a section of Council Station that had been cleared of other vessels. Chen noticed guards everywhere, watching her ship with nervous eyes. She could not blame them. To them, she was a legend made flesh. A warrior from an age of nightmares. She dressed in her formal uniform, the one reserved for diplomatic functions and ceremonies. It felt strange to wear it after so long. The last time she had worn this uniform, she had been attending the funeral of Admiral Wong's son, killed in a Sketh raid. 800 years. The memories felt like yesterday. A shuttle carried her from the Prometheus to the station's main hall. Captain Velnoth met her at the docking bay, looking nervous but determined. "Admiral Chen, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Did I have a choice?" "There is always a choice. You could have refused. You could have attacked. The fact that you did neither tells me something about you." Chen said nothing. She followed Velnoth through corridors filled with beings she had never seen before. Species that had evolved and grown while humanity slept in death. They stared at her as she passed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. The council chamber was a circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Representatives of 100 species filled those seats, their forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely alien. At the highest tier sat the council itself, 12 beings who governed the Galactic Concord, but Chen's eyes found only one figure in the room. The Sethrani representative sat in a place of honor near the council's platform. She was tall and slender, with the segmented body and multiple limbs that Chen remembered from the war. But there were differences. The eyes, once flat and emotionless, now showed depth and feeling. The posture, once aggressive and predatory, was now calm and open. Chen felt her hands curl into fists. 800 years had passed, but her body remembered. Her body remembered the terror and the rage, and the desperate need to survive. "Admiral Lyra Chen of the United Nations ship Prometheus," announced a voice. "Please step forward." Chen walked to the center of the room and stood alone under the lights. The head counselor, a being with silver skin and too many eyes, spoke first. "Admiral Chen, you are the last survivor of the human species. For 800 years, your people have been remembered as both heroes and cautionary tale. We welcome you to the Galactic Concord, though we must admit to some concern about your vessel." "My vessel is a warship," Chen replied. "It was built for one purpose, but I have not fired a weapon since I awakened. And yet you refuse to disarm. Would you disarm, counselor, if you woke up to find the descendants of your greatest enemy still alive and thriving?" The chamber fell silent. Chen turned to look at the Sethrani representative, who met her gaze without flinching. "I am Thresh Ven," the Sethrani said. Her voice was melodic, nothing like the harsh clicking sounds Chen remembered from the war. "I am a descendant of those you call the Sketh, and I am here to speak with you, if you will allow it." "Speak then." Thresh Ven rose from her seat and descended to the central platform. She moved slowly, giving Chen time to react, showing that she meant no threat. "My ancestors were monsters," Thresh Ven said. "I do not deny this. I do not excuse this. They caused suffering beyond measure, and they paid for it with near extinction. But I am not my ancestors. My people are not the Sketh. We have spent 8 centuries trying to prove that we can be better. And you believe you have succeeded? I believe we have made progress. We have laws against violence. We have institutions that promote cooperation. We have philosophers who teach that all life has value." Thresh Ven paused. "We also have a memorial to your people, a place where we go to remember what was lost, and to promise that we will never allow it to happen again." Chen felt something crack inside her. She had seen the memorial in the records, but hearing about it from a Sethrani mouth was different. This was not data on a screen. This was a living being, standing before her, claiming to mourn the death of humanity. "Words are easy," Chen said. "Anyone can build a monument. Anyone can make speeches about peace. But when the time comes to choose between self-interest and sacrifice, what will your people do?" "I do not know," Thresh Ven admitted. "No one can predict the future, but I can tell you what we did in the past. 50 years ago, a disease swept through the outer colonies of the Concord. It was devastating, killing millions. The cure required a rare mineral found only on Sethrani worlds. Our people gave everything we had. We emptied our reserves, sold our treasures, worked our mines until they ran dry. We saved countless lives, including species who had once feared and hated us. That proves nothing. You could have had selfish reasons. We did. We wanted to prove that we were worthy of trust. We wanted to show that the Sethrani were not the Sketh, and we succeeded. Today, we are respected members of the Galactic Concord, not because of what our ancestors were, but because of what we have become." Chen stared at Thresh Ven, searching for deception, for hidden malice, for any sign that this was a lie. She found nothing. The Sethrani's eyes were open and honest, her body language relaxed and genuine, but that only made it worse. If the Sethrani were truly peaceful, then the war had been for nothing. Humanity had destroyed itself fighting an enemy that would have eventually changed on its own. Billions had died for a victory that was not necessary. "Eras," Chen said quietly, activating her communication link to the ship. "Threat assessment of the Sethrani representative. No weapons detected. No hostile intent registered. Physiological readings consistent with truthful communication. The subject appears to be genuine. Admiral?" Chen closed her eyes. For 800 years, she had slept with one dream: victory, the complete destruction of the enemy, the vindication of everything humanity had sacrificed. Now that dream was crumbling, and she did not know what to replace it with. Admiral Chen, the head counselor, said, "We understand your pain. We understand your anger. But we must ask, what are your intentions? The Prometheus is a weapon of unimaginable power. What will you do with it?" Chen opened her eyes and looked around the chamber. 100 species watched her, waiting for her answer. The future of millions hung on her words. "I do not know," she admitted. "I woke up expecting to finish a war. Instead, I found a peace I do not understand. You ask me to trust my enemies, to believe that monsters can become saints. That is not easy." "No one said it would be easy," Threshven replied. "But it is possible. I am living proof." Chen turned back to the Sithrani. "You want me to believe that your people have changed. But I remember what they were. I remember the screams, the blood, the dying. I remember a little girl named Sarah, who died in my arms because your ancestors thought she was nothing but food." Threshven flinched. For the first time, Chen saw pain in those alien eyes. "I cannot undo what was done," Threshven said softly. "I cannot bring back Sarah or the billions of others who died. All I can do is try to ensure that it never happens again. That is why we built the memorial. That is why we teach our children about the war. That is why I am standing here, asking you to give us a chance. A chance to do what? To prove that we are worthy of forgiveness. Not today. Not tomorrow. Perhaps not in your lifetime. But eventually, we will keep trying. For as long as it takes. Because that is what redemption requires." The chamber was silent. Chen felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her, the burden of being the last of her kind. She was tired. So tired. She had been fighting for so long that she had forgotten how to do anything else. "Admiral," Era said through the communication link, "I am detecting elevated stress levels. Do you require assistance?" "No," Chen whispered. "I require a decision." She looked at the Prometheus through the station's windows. Her ship floated in the void, dark and silent, waiting for her command. Inside its hull, Eris monitored every system, ready to unleash destruction at a single word. She could do it. She could return to her ship, activate the weapons, and begin a campaign of extermination. ARS had calculated the odds. 73% chance of success. In 20 years, the Sethrani would be extinct. Humanity would be avenged. But would it be justice? The Sketh were gone. They had died with humanity in the fire of Operation Sunfire. The Sethrani were something new, born from the ashes of 2 extinct species. They had never eaten a human colonist. They had never attacked a human ship. They had only tried to survive and become something better than their ancestors. Could she punish children for the sins of their parents? Could she destroy a civilization for crimes committed 800 years ago by beings who no longer existed? Chen thought of Admiral Wang, sitting alone in his office, making the decision to execute Sunfire. He had chosen genocide because he believed it was the only way to save the galaxy. He had sacrificed humanity to destroy a threat that could never be negotiated with. But the threat had changed. The Sketh had become the Sethrani. The hive mind had fractured into billions of individuals. The predator species had become a peaceful member of the Galactic Concord. Wang had been wrong. The enemy could change. Species could evolve beyond their darkest instincts. Did that mean humanity's sacrifice had been pointless? Or did it mean something else entirely? "Admiral Chen," the head counselor said, "we need your answer. What will you do?" Chen took a deep breath. She thought of Sarah, the little girl who had died so long ago. She thought of her crew, sleeping forever in their broken stasis pods. She thought of Earth and Mars and all the human worlds that had burned in the final fire. Then she thought of the memorial on Sithrani Prime, the monument to humanity that stood at the center of an alien city. She thought of Threshven, standing before her with honest eyes and genuine remorse. She thought of 800 years of peace, built on the ashes of her people's sacrifice. "Ayers," she said through the communication link, "stand down from combat readiness. Deactivate all weapon systems." "Admiral, are you certain? This will leave us defenseless." "I am certain." "Do it." "Understood. Weapons systems deactivating." The Prometheus is now in standard patrol mode. Chen looked at Threshven, at the Sethrani who represented everything she had once hated. "I do not forgive you," she said. "I do not trust you." I may never be able to do either, but I will not destroy you. Not today. Not ever. Threshven bowed her head. Thank you, Admiral. That is more than we deserve. Perhaps, but it is what humanity would have wanted. We did not sacrifice ourselves so that our last survivor could become a monster. Chen turned to the council. I will remain in this sector with my ship. I will watch. I will observe. If the Sethrani prove themselves worthy of peace, I will accept it. If they return to their old ways, I will end them. Either way, the Prometheus will be here. The head counselor nodded slowly. That is acceptable. The Galactic Concord welcomes you, Admiral Chen. Not as a weapon, but as a witness. May you find what you are looking for. Chen did not know what she was looking for. Closure? Redemption? A reason to keep living in a universe that had moved on without her? All she knew was that the war was finally over. And somehow, she needed to find a new purpose. She walked out of the council chamber, past the staring eyes of 100 species, past the guards and the diplomats and the curious onlookers. She returned to her shuttle and flew back to the Prometheus, the ghost warship that had been her home for so long. Ares greeted her as she stepped onto the bridge. Welcome back, Admiral. All systems report normal operation. Weapons remain offline per your orders. Good. Maintain current status. Understood. What are your next orders? Chen sat in her command chair and looked out at the stars. The galaxy stretched before her, vast and strange and full of possibilities she had never imagined. I do not have orders yet, she said. I need to think. For the first time in a very long time, I need to think about something other than war. I will await your instructions, Admiral. Chen nodded and closed her eyes. The silence of the bridge surrounded her, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. She was still a soldier. She always would be. But perhaps, after 800 years, she could learn to be something else as well. The last human sat alone in her ghost ship, surrounded by stars, and waited for the future to reveal itself. 5 years passed. Admiral Lyra Chen had expected those years to be empty, a slow slide into irrelevance as the galaxy continued without her. Instead, she found herself busier than she had ever been during the war. The Galactic Concord wanted to learn from her. Scientists came to study the Prometheus, marveling at technology that was 800 years old yet still more advanced than anything they had developed. Historians interviewed her for hours, recording every detail of the war she could remember. Philosophers debated the ethics of her choices, of humanity's choices, of the decisions that had led to Operation Sunfire. Chen answered their questions as honestly as she could. She told them about the early days of the war, when humanity still believed they could win through conventional means. She told them about the desperate middle years, when the Sketh seemed endless and victory seemed impossible. She told them about the final days, when Admiral Wang and the Council had made their terrible choice. But most of all, she told them about the people, the soldiers who had fought and died, the scientists who had worked through the night to develop new weapons, the civilians who had kept working, kept living, kept hoping even as their worlds burned around them. She told them about Sarah, the little girl who had become a symbol of everything humanity was fighting for. The Sethrani listened to these stories more closely than anyone. They sent scholars to study human culture, artists to recreate human art, musicians to learn human songs. They wanted to understand the species their ancestors had tried to destroy. Threshven became a regular visitor to the Prometheus. At first, Chen had been cold to her, barely tolerating her presence. But as the years passed, something changed. She began to see Threshven not as a representative of the enemy, but as an individual, a person with her own thoughts, her own hopes, her own fears. They talked about everything: the war, the peace, the meaning of survival when everything you loved was gone. Threshven understood loneliness in a way that few others could. As a Sethrani who had devoted her life to studying humanity, she had often felt like an outsider among her own people. We are both lost, Threshven said during one of their conversations. You are the last of a dead species. I am a stranger in a living one. Perhaps that is why we can talk to each other. Perhaps, Chen agreed. Or perhaps we are both too stubborn to give up. They laughed at that. It was the first time Chen had laughed in years. On the 5th anniversary of her awakening, Chen made a decision. She called a meeting of the Galactic Concord Council. the Sithrani leadership, and the major media organizations of 100 species. The galaxy watched as she stood once again in the center of the council chamber. "I have spent 5 years observing," she said, "watching, waiting for the Sithrani to show their true nature. I was certain that they were hiding something, that their peaceful exterior was a mask for the monsters beneath." The chamber was silent. Every eye was fixed on Chen. "I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chen raised her hand for silence. "The Sithrani are not the Sketh. They may share the same biology, the same ancestry, but they are fundamentally different. They have built a civilization based on cooperation, not predation. They have rejected the ways of their ancestors and created something new." She turned to face the Sithrani delegation. Thresh Ven sat among them, her eyes bright with emotion. "I do not forgive what the Sketh did. I never will. But I recognize that the Sithrani are not responsible for those crimes. They have worked for 8 centuries to prove themselves worthy of trust. Today, I acknowledge that work." Chen paused, gathering herself for what came next. "The Prometheus is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. It was built to destroy the Sketh, to fight until nothing remained of the enemy. But the enemy is gone. The Sketh died with humanity in Operation Sunfire. There is no one left to fight." She looked around the chamber, at the faces of 100 species, at the representatives of civilizations that humanity had never known. "I have decided to transfer the Prometheus to the Galactic Concord. It will become a museum, a memorial to the human-Sketh war. Let people come and see what we built. Let them understand the cost of total war. Let them remember why peace is worth fighting for." The chamber erupted in applause. Chen stood quietly, accepting their gratitude without really feeling it. She was not doing this for applause. She was doing it because it was right. Later, when the ceremonies were over and the dignitaries had departed, Thresh Ven found Chen standing alone in the observation deck of Council Station. "That was a brave thing you did," Thresh Ven said. "It was a necessary thing. The Prometheus was built for a war that is over. Keeping it as a weapon would be a betrayal of everything humanity died for. And yet, you look sad." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "The Prometheus was my home. My crew served on that ship. They died on that ship. In some ways, giving it up feels like losing them all over again." Thresh Ven reached out and touched Chen's hand. The contact was light, respectful, offering comfort without demanding it. "They are not lost," Thresh Ven said. "They live on in the ship, in the stories you tell, in the memorial we will build together. As long as we remember them, they are not truly gone." Chen looked at the Sithrani, at this being who had become something unexpected. A friend, perhaps the only friend she had in this strange new universe. "I want to visit your homeworld," Chen said. "I want to see the memorial. You would be welcome. More than welcome." A month later, the Prometheus made its final voyage. Under Chen's command, the Ghost Warship traveled to Sithrani Prime, carrying a crew of Concord historians and Sithrani guides. The journey took 3 days, time that Chen spent walking through the corridors she had known so well. She visited the crew quarters, now empty and silent. She touched the photographs that still hung on the walls, images of families that had died 800 years ago. She sat in the mess hall where her crew had shared meals and jokes and moments of connection in the midst of war. And she said goodbye. "Eras," she said on the last night of the voyage. "How do you feel about becoming a museum?" "I do not feel, Admiral. I am an artificial intelligence. I process information and execute commands." "That is not what I asked." There was a pause, longer than usual. When Air spoke again, something in its voice had changed. "I was designed to fight, Admiral, to destroy the enemy, until nothing remained. For 800 years, I waited for the chance to fulfill my purpose, but the enemy is gone. My purpose is unclear. Perhaps your new purpose is to teach, to help people understand what war costs, so they will work harder to avoid it. That is a significant change in operational parameters, but I am capable of adaptation. I will fulfill whatever role is assigned to me. And if the Sithrani return to their old ways, if the peace fails and war comes again, then I will be ready, Admiral. My weapon systems are deactivated, but they are not destroyed. If I am ever needed, I can be restored to full combat capability within 72 hours. Chen nodded slowly. She had expected nothing less. Ares was a weapon, and weapons did not truly retire. They simply waited. Keep watching, Ares. That is your final order. Watch over the galaxy. If the peace holds, remain silent. If it fails, I will protect what remains of humanity's legacy. I understand, Admiral. The Prometheus arrived at Sithrani Prime just as the sun was setting. The planet was beautiful, covered in purple forests and silver oceans, dotted with cities that gleamed in the fading light. Chen stood at the view screen and watched as they descended through the atmosphere. The memorial was visible even from orbit, a massive structure of black stone, shaped like a human figure, reaching toward the stars. It stood at the center of the capital city, surrounded by parks and gardens and quiet spaces for reflection. Millions of Sithrani had gathered to watch the arrival of the Prometheus. They lined the streets, filled the parks, crowded onto rooftops. Chen had expected hostility, or at least wariness. Instead, she saw something else entirely. They were welcoming her. The shuttle landed at the base of the memorial. Chen stepped out into the warm air of an alien world, and the Sithrani parted to make a path for her. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their silence was a tribute, a recognition of everything she had lost. She walked toward the memorial, Threshven at her side. The human figure loomed above her, 30 meters tall, carved with incredible detail. She could see the face, strong and determined, looking up at the stars with hope and defiance. Who was the model for this? Chen asked. No one specific. Our artists studied every image of humanity we could find. They wanted to capture the essence of your species. The courage, the determination, the refusal to give up, even when all hope was lost. Chen touched the base of the statue. The stone was warm from the sun, smooth under her fingers. We did give up in the end. We chose to die rather than keep fighting. No, Threshven said firmly. You chose to sacrifice yourself so that the galaxy could live. That is not giving up. That is the ultimate act of courage. Chen closed her eyes. She thought of Admiral Wong, making his terrible choice. She thought of her crew, sleeping in their broken pods. She thought of Sarah, the little girl who had died too young. And she thought of the Sithrani, standing in silent tribute around her. The descendants of the enemy, honoring the species that had destroyed itself to stop them. Perhaps this was what redemption looked like. Not forgiveness. Exactly. Not forgetting. But something new, built from the ashes of the past. I have something to ask, Chen said. When I die, I want to be buried here, at the base of this memorial. Is that possible? Threshven's eyes widened. You would choose to rest among us? After everything that happened? The war is over. The enemy is gone. All that remains are people trying to build a better future. Chen looked up at the memorial, at the human figure reaching for the stars. This is the only place in the galaxy where humanity is still remembered. Where else would I want to rest? Then it will be done. When your time comes, you will be buried here, with full honors. The galaxy will remember Lyra Chen as the last human, the woman who had the power to destroy and chose instead to heal. Chen nodded. She did not know how much time she had left. The stasis had preserved her, but she was still old by human standards. Years, perhaps. Maybe decades. It did not matter. She had found what she was looking for. She spent the rest of that day walking through the city, talking to Sithrani who wanted to meet her, answering questions from children who had only known humanity as a story. She told them about Earth, about the blue oceans and the green forests and the cities that had reached toward the sky. She told them about music and art and love and all the things that had made humanity more than just a species of warriors. And they listened. They recorded every word, every image, every moment. They were building an archive of humanity, a collection of memories that would survive long after Chen was gone. That night, standing on a balcony overlooking the memorial, Chen made a final broadcast. It was transmitted across the galaxy, to every world, every station, every ship. The last message from the last human. My name is Lyra Chen. I am the final survivor of a species that destroyed itself to save the galaxy. For 800 years, we have been remembered as warriors, as destroyers, as the species that built weapons too terrible to use. She paused, looking up at the stars. But we were more than that. We were dreamers and builders and lovers. We wrote poetry and painted pictures and told stories around fires. We raised children and cared for our elderly and mourned our dead. We were human. Today, I am giving you the Prometheus, the most powerful weapon humanity ever built. It will become a museum, a reminder of what war costs. Walk its corridors. Look at the photographs of our families. Read the letters we wrote to loved ones we would never see again. And remember that behind every soldier, there is a person. Behind every weapon, there is a hand that did not want to build it. The war is over. Humanity is gone. But our legacy remains. Not the weapons, not the destruction, the hope, the belief that tomorrow could be better than today, the willingness to sacrifice everything for a future we would never see. That is what I want you to remember. Not how we fought, how we loved, how we hoped, how we dreamed. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 8 centuries lifting from her shoulders. This is Admiral Lyra Chen, last survivor of the United Nations, ship Prometheus, signing off. Thank you for listening, and thank you for remembering. The broadcast ended. Chen stood alone on the balcony, surrounded by the stars of an alien sky. She was tired, so tired. But for the first time since she had awakened, she felt at peace. In the years that followed, the Prometheus Museum became the most visited site in the Galactic Concord. Billions came to walk its corridors, to learn about the species that had lived and died in the darkness of space. School children of 100 races listened to recorded messages from human crew members, saw photographs of human families, touched artifacts that had survived 8 centuries. And in the ship's core, Eras watched, silent, patient, waiting. The peace held. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. The Sethrani continued to evolve, to grow, to prove themselves worthy of the trust they had been given. Admiral Lyra Chen died peacefully in her sleep, 53 years after her awakening. She was buried at the base of the memorial, as she had requested. The funeral was attended by representatives of every species in the Galactic Concord. Threshven, now very old herself, spoke the final words. She had the power to destroy us all. She chose to teach us instead. That is the legacy of humanity. Not their weapons, their mercy. And in the silence of the Prometheus, AREs recorded everything. Every face, every word, every tear. The galaxy remembered humanity, and AREs remembered too, just in case.